some assortment of books we have this month. So what happened is that December was really hectic and I didn't get to read as many books as I might have wanted to. I only read one big novel and a series of short stories, so let's just talk about them this month. How about that? I'm a big fan of the French musical Notre de Paris, and the original cast recently had a reunion. They sang all the songs that I love, and I felt that resurgence of my obsession with it, so I decided to reread the original novel. Ironically now, I first read it when I was about Esmeralda's age. She's 16 in the novel. I was maybe 14, 15, something like that. And now I'm reading it and I'm Frollo's age. How does the time fly? This used to be my copy of the novel. It's kind of falling apart a little bit. It's actually not a bad page. That's when Phoebus gets stabbed. But I decided to treat myself and I got myself a new copy for Christmas. And let me tell you, for a cheap paperback, the quality is actually there. It still has that new book smell. Sorry. Also, I'm not for hoarding books. Having too much stuff in the house really started to suffocate me recently. But I went to get this copy from a bookshop. And let me tell you, the fact that I couldn't take this entire display home with me really made me sad. But I digress. Notre de Paris, also known as Hunchback of Notre Dame, is a very solid novel from Victor Hugo. I read up on it a little bit as well, and it was fairly revolutionary for the time period, almost inventing this genre of historical novel. And the novel is fairly historically accurate, as Hugo spends a lot of time describing the Paris of the time period, the architecture, the cathedral, even the King Louis XI and all that. At times it almost felt like the Hunchback storyline was really distracting him from what he really wanted to talk about, and that is the city, the architecture, the cathedral, the printing press and alchemy. This unfortunately makes the novel slightly uneven, as at one point he grinds the story to a halt and just spends like 2 to 3 long sections just really talking about Paris from bird's eye view. If you are into that sort of stuff, all the power to you. On this reread, I really had to waddle my way through it. Other tangents are much better integrated, though, that needs to be said. And it's also worth mentioning that the intent of saving the cathedral that's fallen into disrepair during Hugo's time was achieved and the restorations took place. And in the light of the somewhat recent fire and the restoration, it's once again become relevant. It's one of those landmarks that is forever changed, and not only can we not see it the way it was during Hugo's time, we cannot even actually see it the way it was 6 years ago. I was lucky enough to see it before the fire, and I hope to see it again now that it's restored once again. I truly love that cathedral. It has a certain majesty to it. But what is slightly ironic is that Hugo dedicates a lot of time to describing it here, and that's actually a good thing too, because now we have like a record of it. But it's also fairly ironic because he spends a lot of time talking in the novel about how architecture used to be the language that humans used to preserve history, and now it's become the Gutenberg's invention. I dread to think what replaces it now. Please don't let it be TikTok. The actual plotline of the novel is fairly simple. It needs to be said that Hugo doesn't have a subtle touch when it comes to his metaphors in messaging. You know the story. There is this beautiful girl called Esmeralda and multiple men lusting after her. The priest Frollo, his charge, the hunchback of Notre Dame, Quasimodo, and the beautiful captain of the guard called Phoebus. There is also Gringoire, but Gringoire has his own thing going on. I love him for it. He's so weird. But this love complicated shape that it makes creates these parallels, like Esmeralda loves Phoebus because he's so hot and she fears Quasimodo because he's so ugly, but also the love that Quasimodo has for Esmeralda makes him better, while nominally the same feeling throws Frollo to the depths of hell. And it's all very much on the surface. At one point, when Esmeralda is hiding in Notre Dame, Quasimodo brings her 2 sets of flowers. One in this beautiful glass vase that has a crack in it, so the water runs out and the flowers wilt. And the other in this clay monstrosity that he made, but that holds water and keeps the flowers fresh. And Esmeralda only cares for the flowers that used to be in this beautiful vase and carries them around, even though they're wilted. I get it, it's not subtle. Realistically, it's not a bad thing for a novel that has so many other things going on. Because the main storyline has so many branch offs that nominally have nothing to do with the main storyline, but they flesh out the world that the characters live in, but also contextualize the characters as well. Like, for example, Frollo has a baby brother that is left out of most adaptations, but he is the main motivation for Frollo taking in Quasimodo, because he's just taking charge of his brother because their parents died, and he feels that his brother could have easily ended up in Quasimodo's position, so he extends that same mercy to Quasimodo. Or Frollo, for example, has this entire side plot about him looking for Philosopher's Stone and doubling in alchemy and consulting to Louis XI as well. There is so much in this novel that I could go on and on and on. But that's what makes a novel a truly great one. If it were only the love story, nobody would have cared. But all of these big and little details really truly make a novel like this and make it into a great novel. I know that some parts of the audience have issues with the Romani representation in the novel, and yes, it's not ideal. I'm maybe not the one to speak on it here, but can it at least be treated as the view of Romani people back then? It is unfair, yes, this idea that they were all thieves and scoundrels who used to steal babies and apparently eat them, because obviously that's not true, but that's what people believed of them then, so does that make it historically accurate in that sense? And honestly, I do not care about Esmeralda being a white girl, but also, do Romani people actually want her as their representation? This shallow, beautiful girl, courageous, yes, but so naive. I just feel like Romani people deserve better representation, is all I'm saying. To make the story short, even if you're familiar with the story through adaptations, especially if you're only familiar with the story through the Disney adaptation of it, it's still very much worthy of a read here for all of these little and big details that Hugo brings in, for the historical accuracy and for the beautiful language that he also wields. I'm not going to talk about the Russian short stories that I read. They're not translated into English, so there's no point of me going on about them here in this venue. And to be perfectly honest, I didn't love that many of them. There is one that I liked. It's called Their Land by Daria Blagova. It's written in the style of an old school legend, and I enjoyed it. But also what I enjoyed is that the theme for the collection was Christmas, New Year's, winter, and it's fairly interesting to see how different authors view this season. I went to the library to grab some other books that I needed for my proper reviews, like I grabbed Aitmatov and Gazdanov, if you're interested in spoilers, what's coming. And I saw this on the shelf and I was like, oh, yeah, I've heard a lot about this book, so let's see what it is. And no. It was really, really bad. This is Normal People by Sally Rooney, and I know that it was fairly popular at one point. And to be fair, I understand what Rooney is trying to do here. However, I have three main issues with this particular novel. First, and the most damning in my opinion, is how poor the language is. On my first attempt at reading it, I made it through like 4 pages before abandoning it, because it was entirely dialogue, but also like very stinted dialogue, constantly interrupted by literal he said, she said. This is a Russian copy. Russian copy does not allow for this. When you're writing dialogue like that, it cannot be just simply he said, she said. It's supposed to be like he said, she whispered, he murmured, she yelled, he responded, she answered, he yelled, she whispered, all of that. You are not supposed to rely on one single verb. So it is a little bit the translation's fault for not working through this, but also at the same time, I looked at the English copy of it and it's not much better there. It reads poor in English still because there is not much going on. The characters moving around, yapping about something, and there is nothing there. And look, I get that it's supposed to add to this normalcy thing that supposedly is the theme of the novel, but no, it just simply reads boring, not engaging, and made me constantly want to drop this book. And on top of that, for whatever reason, they decided to do away with proper syntax in this book, and that just simply annoyed me. Second, I feel like I'm simply too old for this topic. The characters in the story are late high schoolers, early college students, and I feel like a granny yelling at them to get off my lawn, or rather for them to grow up and stop whining. And it's not even strictly fair. The characters in the novel are dealing with real mental health issues. One of them is in therapy, which is awesome, but I simply do not care anymore. By the end, I was screaming at the book because there was nothing going on. They were not communicating and constantly going around in circles. When a problem can be solved by a simple talk to each other, I have no patience anymore. And most of the problems in this book were just that. And that's kind of the third problem. This book is about these deeply traumatized teenagers and their situationship, but because they are stupid teenagers, they are stuck in this endless loop of the same problems and misunderstandings that could have easily been solved by an honest conversation. If you, lovely readers who love this book, come away from it having learned that lesson that you actually need to talk to your partner or like people in general, then that's awesome. I just simply do not need it repeated to me anymore. Otherwise, it's a very simple book about characters that have very little depth to them, with a non-existent, uneven plot. But if you like stories about teenage angst, it might be for you. It was simply not for me. Conversely, I also read a Russian novel called Middle-Aged about the problems of the 30-somethings in the upper middle class, their interpersonal relationships, career struggles, financial problems, and that's the problems that I actually care about. The narrative is structured around the disappearance of a man, and a detective is going around his friends and family asking them about the missing man and their relationship. And through those conversations, not only do they provide different views of the same people and same interactions, but also reveal things about themselves. And that's what I loved. It's a very easy narration style, but it has depth to it. So if you read Russian or if you're learning Russian, I can definitely recommend that you check this book out. How do we feel about Pygmalion these days? I felt weary when I started. I was vaguely aware of the plot through the cultural osmosis, but definitely not the minutiae of it, and not the moral of it. And when you start and show goes on and on about phonetics and accents, it felt rather stuffy and weird. Especially now, I felt like the UK is trying to embrace regional accents and all. But also, my native Russian doesn't have accents in the same way that English does, so it's all a little bit foreign to me. But then the actual story started and made much more sense. Because at the end of the day, Shaw is criticizing this snobbery and praising basic human decency and all these other qualities, rather than class and upbringing. Eliza is a way better person coming from the bottom, while Higgins, for all of his knowledge and class, lacks basic human traits like human decency, emotional intelligence, and all of that, and he's overall an ass. I fully hated Higgins. I was listening to an audiobook while on a walk, and I think I might have scared some passers-by with my expressions and exclamations at Higgins and his character, let's call it that. But that's the entire point. He is the way that he is to criticize this type of man, but also to show this difference between him and Eliza, because she not only gets to display this growth in her, but also the true moral high ground that she holds over him. And honestly, that's why I was so relieved at the ending, that she found her voice, but also the strength not to remain in his orbit, to break free and actually find use for all of this that he's taught her, not only providing value to herself, but to others as well. I felt that it was a cathartic ending for her and a damning one for Higgins, but also very much in line with the story as it was told and in line with the lesson that Shaw was trying to teach us. And that made me quite surprised that he had to defend that ending in the epilogue. I felt like that was the only ending possible for the story as written, but then I watched My Fair Lady. This is a book channel, not a movie review channel, so I will make it brief. But they have not done anything in that movie to justify the change in the ending. Higgins behaves the same way that Book Higgins does, if not worse, so there is no reason for Eliza to change her mind there. It felt like this old Hollywood thing where they simply wanted to have a happy ending. I felt the same way with Breakfast at Tiffany's, where they also entirely missed the point of the book by shoving this love story in. And here, that last line from Higgins, it kills me. It actually pains me.
Where the devil are my slippers?
No change from him, no lessons learned, only Eliza now stuck with him. Like, oh boy. But the play does what it needs to do, and it does it effectively, so it's already a win for me. And I did enjoy it as much as one can enjoy a story like this. It had that British dryness and sarcasm in it that reminded me quite a bit of Oscar Wilde. That dude was not pulling any punches, and neither does Shaw, and I do love that in my authors. The only downside is that I've chosen to listen to an audiobook because I really wanted to have that experience of the full Cockney accent. I felt like I couldn't properly imagine it in my head. But the only version of the audiobook that was readily available to me, the narrator I felt couldn't do accents either, but also this is the voice that he chose for Eliza.
Who's trying to deceive you? I called him Freddie or Charlie, same as you might yourself, if you was talking to a stranger.
Yeah, not a great plan. Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens was a very solid novel, like 4 out of 5. I almost never give scores like that, but it feels appropriate here. The tagline on the cover is from New York Times, at once a murder mystery, a coming-of-age story, and a celebration of nature, and I feel like it sums up this book quite nicely. The story is of a young girl called Kia in the 1950s Southern Carolina. She gets abandoned by everybody in her life at a very young age and has to fend for herself. She lives in the marshes, so she's very much in tune with nature, and that eventually leads to a career opportunity for her. On the side here, in a slightly different time stream, a murder investigation takes place that very much involves Kia. I've said this before, I'm not the biggest fan of the murder mystery genre, and especially here, I clocked the whodunit pretty early on, and so it was simply a matter of waiting on what the investigation finds and how the trial goes. And while that adds some tension to the story, not nearly enough, and so that made this part of the book the weakest for me. I was much more invested in the coming-of-age narrative. I found Kia as a character compelling, I felt for her, and I also liked the descriptions of nature and her interactions with it. That's where the author's main occupation comes in. She's a biologist, so you feel the love that she has for nature. That's why I enjoyed the first part of the book a little bit more. Yes, the descriptions of Kia's childhood are a little bit naive. There are so many things in there that would never actually happen, but I was willing to let it play out, kind of suspend my disbelief and just enjoy the journey. In the second part of the book, Kia veered a little bit too far into Mary Sue territory. Some of it could have easily been shaved off, especially with the end reveal that I'm not going to spoil for you. But if I were to really nitpick here, the feeling that I had while reading this novel is that I've read all of this before. Especially at the end, there is a moment when Kia is taken away from her home and she sits there and longs for the return to nature and to the marshes. And I got this distinct sense of déjà vu, like I've already seen this type of character in this exact situation before, but I couldn't place it. And that's probably it. The story is not groundbreaking. We've seen stories like this before. However, I enjoyed the experience of reading it. So if you're looking for some light reading, I can recommend this book without any issue. One more book that I read in Russian this month that is not translated into English, as far as I know, but I wanted to talk about it briefly. It's called The Last Notes from a Woman's Diary by Valery Bryusov. I really need to talk to you about him at some point. He has a novel, Fury Angel, that I need to read, but I have not been in the mood just yet. I will get to it eventually. But this short story I enjoyed quite a bit. I'm always wary of men writing women, especially in the early 20th century, but I did enjoy the way Bryusov described her and her behavior, her relationship with her man, her motivations, and her point of view. This book is also a weird blend of Crime and Punishment and Lady Macbeth of Msensk district that randomly ends with lesbian incest. The Roaring Twenties indeed. For completion's sake, let's say that I also started All God's Time by Sebastian Barry. I made it through about a quarter of it, and I don't think I'm gonna finish it. I peeked at the reviews to see if I'm gonna miss out on anything, and by the looks of it, not much. The theme is Ireland and Catholic priests, and the entire book is these introspections and memories of a retired policeman. The first quarter of the book that I read didn't captivate me at all. The language was good enough, but nothing happened that would keep me going. And I normally have no problem with slow-paced books. There's simply something missing here. Besides the theme, Calvary, that movie with Brendan Gleeson, kind of satisfied that theme for me for a very long time, I feel like. So I'm gonna sit this book out. And that's about it. And I will see you next month.